top of the hour. Lisa, if you want to go to the next slide. I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the launch of this new guidance document prepared by the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative in partnership with the IFC and with support from UN Women. We have a very full agenda today. We're going to work through approximately 11 speakers in 60 minutes. So I'm going to be very brief. Just in housekeeping, we will not have time for Q&A with the audience today. That said, the chat box is open. Feel free to submit any questions you have there, and myself or another member of the Secretariat will try to get back to you with answers. We'll also be providing links for where you can download the report. And with that, with no further ado, I'd like to go to our first keynote speaker, Mr. James Zahn, who is the Director of the Investment Division at UNCTAD and is also Chair of the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative Governing Board. James, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Distinguished speakers, colleagues from IFC, UN Women, and stock exchanges worldwide, and participants. We are happy to welcome you today to this event on International Women's Day to launch our newly updated guidance entitled How Exchanges Can Advance Gender Equality. Let me start with by saying that gender equality is a human right and an essential component of the Sustainable Development Goals. Most of us are familiar with SDG 5 on gender equality, but some people may not realize that gender equality underpins more than half of the SDGs. 9 out of the 17 SDGs make gender-specific references. For example, SDG 8 states, I quote, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, end of quote. It aims to create equal opportunities in employment and fair earnings for women and men everywhere. So gender equality is not only a human right, but also an integral element for achieving the SDGs. In addition, eliminating gender-based discrimination in companies is also backed by a solid business case. Many studies have shown that having women around the table leads to new growth and investment opportunities for enterprises. Today, female participation in many markets is far from equal. Research published last year by our Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative and IFC revealed that women are significantly underrepresented in corporate leadership. Women occupied only less than 20% of corporate board seats in G20 countries. Sadly, women are less likely to control household financial decisions and are more likely to become victims of violence and harassment. And this is wrong, and the world can do something about it. All entities of society, including stock exchanges and listed companies, must act to ensure that the world of today is a more equal place for all. It is not a secret why the UN works with stock exchanges. Globally, exchanges listed over 50,000 companies with market capitalization of over $90 trillion US. Exchanges have the ability to influence and define the market expectations and to scale up and accelerate sustainable development. Whether we look at gender equality as a basic human right or simply as a business case, exchanges are well positioned to advance gender equality. For nearly a decade now, gender equality has been a key pillar of our Sustainable Stock Exchange work. We engaged with SSE members early on to ensure exchanges leverage their influence to raise awareness for gender equality and create tangible results in their markets. I still remember that on the same day in 2015, I made an opening statement at the first Ring the Bell for Gender Equality event in Istanbul, organized by our SSE team led by Anthony Miller, together with colleagues from UN Women and the UN Global Compact. At that time, only 7 exchanges participated. And this year, over 100 exchanges are holding these events worldwide. This move from niche to mainstream is a sign that the sector is aware of the importance of gender equality and ready to take practical action. To support exchanges in their efforts, I'm proud that our SSE, in partnership with the colleagues at IFC, has created this new guidance on how exchanges can advance gender equality. The document was prepared in strategic collaboration with UN Women and is informed by the hundreds of valuable inputs from 71 experts across 34 countries, a true product of international multi-stakeholder collaboration. The report provides 67 examples of practical action by exchanges and offers all exchanges a true peer-to-peer learning opportunity. Today, I would call on all exchanges to learn from their peers and accelerate action on gender equality as an essential element for achieving the SDGs. To all exchanges, I committed that our SSE will support you in your endeavors. Going forward, our SSE will build on this guidance with training programs for exchanges and their issuers. We'll also expand our database on gender equality to serve as the benchmark to measure progress. We'll do this in collaboration with IFC and UN Women and stock exchanges around the world. Dear participants, I wish to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to the IFC and UN Women and to our SSE partner exchanges for their great collaboration. Credit also goes to our SSE interagency team managed by Anthony Miller. I hope that this guidance helps exchanges to take decisive actions to advance gender equality. I look forward to meeting with all of you again in the future to take stock of what we have achieved. Thank you. Over to you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, James. I'd like to now give the floor to Ms. Denise Adara, the Head of Investor Relations at IFC. Denise, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I'm sincerely honored to be here with all of you today. Such an auspicious day in these interesting times. And of course, these are very interesting times indeed. I want to start off by wishing you all a happy International Women's Day. And that goes to women and of course men who are allies of equality. International Women's Day, an effort, as you know, that has existed in various forms across the world for more than 100 years. But as some of you may know, this hasn't always been celebrated on the 8th of March. This date came about as a result of a wartime strike by women in Russia in 1917. So we've come full circle. As I said, we're in interesting times, and my heart goes out to the people of Ukraine, the mothers, daughters, sisters, who may have to carry the brunt of this exploitation. I think it was Wangari Maathai who once said, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, and that time is now. From the early concept of stock exchanges back in Antwerp or Lyon in the 1500s, stock exchanges have proven to be uniquely positioned to influence markets in a way that only a few other actors can. They bring about the connection between companies, investors, and policymakers. And in today's world, and in the future that we aspire to, these are the parties that need to connect even more to ensure that we meet the SDGs. Now, gender inequality, which was essentially almost one could describe as a fly in the ointment of global business, is now front and center of global business debates. And stock exchanges can play a role in rallying the private sector to increase women's participation in business and in economic development, which would, of course, have a catalytic effect of promoting SDGs 5 and 17, in fact. So today, on the occasion of International Women's Day, we're launching this guidance report on how exchanges can advance gender equality. And the report is shaped by real-world examples from stock, bond, and derivative exchanges around the world. What it does do is it details an action plan, best practice examples for exchanges to use not only in their own markets, but within their operations as well, breaking this down into 4 key areas, one being disclosing gender performance, implementing policies that support equality in the workplace, the third being promoting gender-focused products and services, and 4, increasing female representation in boardrooms and in senior management. The guide also calls on exchanges to lead by example. And I note personally that it's inspiring to see some of the world's leading stock exchanges are now run or co-led by women. This morning, we rang the bell for gender equality at the London Stock Exchange with Julia Hoggett, who, of course, is the CEO. You have Luxembourg, New York Stock Exchange, Nasdaq, Johannesburg, Hong Kong, even Saudi, to name but a few, many of whom are members of the SSE. Now, through IFC's continued partnership with the SSE initiative, we're working on ESG issues, including disclosure and transparency, as well as advancing women in capital markets. And jointly, we produced, of course, this ranking of the G20 markets on board and senior management compositions, with a view to expanding coverage to all emerging markets. Now, we've also, as James had, launched this database to store this information, allowing for easy access and regular updates. Our own work at IFC with exchanges reaches thousands of companies to amplify the importance of increasing female representation in boardrooms, and as I mentioned, in senior management and in C-suite positions. My colleague Henrietta once said, "You cannot win a football match with only half your players on the field." Our conviction is that she is utterly correct. And we're very proud of our gender-related work, partnering with stock exchanges and regulators around the world. In Brazil, as an example, alongside the Brazilian Stock Exchange, we're co-sponsoring a mentoring program. And since 2015, about 140 women have participated in this one-year program, which includes mentoring from CEOs and entrepreneurs who are prominent board members. In Egypt, our survey of over 2,000 businesses found that with gender diverse boards, businesses outperform those with all male boards. And we've seen iterations of this in various efforts. The findings of this, though, were instrumental in the Egyptian exchange's decision to make it mandatory for all listed companies to have boards that are 25% female, or at least have 2 female board members. We've also been active in Indonesia, where alongside the stock exchange, we jointly launched the Board Diversity in ASEAN Study in 2019. One area that I would say that we recognize is this area of influence where exchanges have the ability to include gender components in their ESG disclosure guidance or listing requirements. And so in Kazakhstan, we worked with CASE to improve the disclosure practices of listed companies to essentially include this information on diversity and percentage of women on boards. And we're similarly working with Nigeria, Colombo, Vietnam stock exchanges, etc. And we want to do more because there's so much more to be done. So this guidance today is being widely disseminated through different channels, including Ring the Bell for Gender Equality events around the world. Over the past 8 years, IFC and our global partners, including, of course, the SSE and UN Women, have partnered on the Ring the Bell for Gender Equality events with stock exchanges around the world to shine this light on the important role that stock exchanges can play in advancing women's equality. As James has said earlier, this year we've had nearly 120 exchanges registered to participate, which is a meteoric rise from fewer than 10 in 2015. Addressing gender inequalities at the markets level requires multiple fronts of efforts. And I thank you all for being a part of this bandwagon to do more, to do better. Together, through such effective partnerships, we can make the stock exchange the vendor for gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Denise. And we are very grateful for our collaboration with IFC, and we look forward to continuing that collaboration in the future. I'd like to now go next to Anna Faith, who is the head of the Women's Empowerment Principles Secretariat at UN Women. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Good morning, everyone from New York, and happy 2022 International Women's Day. I'm calling in from Nasdaq, where we have just rang the opening bell for gender equality as part of the initiative that you've heard the previous speaker talk about. Traditionally, this is a day of celebration. We celebrate progress on gender equality and women's empowerment. However, challenges faced by women and girls today are growing more difficult and more costly. The COVID pandemic, climate change, and more recently, the situation in Ukraine are taking disproportionate toll on women and girls. Over the past years, we have witnessed a distressing erosion of progress towards gender equality. This is bad news for both women and men. The kind of prosperity that we all want and need is unattainable in a world with persistent gender discrimination, inequalities, and biases. Currently, as we know from the World Economic Forum, it will take about 268 years to close the economic gender gap. We all need to do much better than that. These gaps don't only have a high cost to society, but also to individual organizations. And actions have clear benefits. Let me just mention a few. When women participate equally with men in the economy, from the factory floor to the corporate board, and organizations attract and retain talent, have better financial performance and return on investment, generate diverse and ideas and innovation, better meet the needs and demands of consumers, and attract investment. Investors today know that companies that take a gender equality seriously are more productive, less risky, and maintain a positive reputation. As we are coming together for International Women's Day this year, nearly 120 exchanges have joined our Ring the Bell for Gender Equality campaign. This, as we heard from Jane Chan, represents a huge increase from niche to mainstream. So why is this significant? Exchanges play an incredibly influential role in setting the bar for listed companies to contribute to gender equality and in leading by example. Exchanges, as we heard earlier, can set standards and measure women's empowerment within and across listed companies, can make corporate culture and behaviors transparent and ultimately accountable, both positive and negative, can help unleash the power of gender finance, as has been done for green finance or sustainable finance, such as through gender bonds, encourage women to invest in public markets, or lead by example internally by setting up women leadership opportunities, recruitment of women into the organization, equal pay, and sexual harassment policies. And as we heard from IFC, really become an exchange. The exchange is becoming a vendor for gender equality. I like that. As we heard, many of these exchanges are joining us today and are covered in the guidance. About 30 of the exchanges and about 6,200 companies across 150 countries have adopted the women's empowerment principles. They show and are showing that they're taking this agenda seriously. The women's empowerment principles provide a powerful blueprint for business to advance gender equality in the workplace, marketplace, and community. And evidence shows that companies that have adopted the women's empowerment principles do significantly better than those that have not. The guidance that we're launching today is particularly relevant and timely. With greater intensity, both the public and the investors are demanding verifiable, responsible gender practices in business. At the core, exchanges are the means for investors to place their capital and their trust in one company over another. The choice is regularly based on profit, but increasingly, and rightly so, it's based on expectations about impact. And it's high time to make gender an indispensable part of that impact. Let me close by thanking the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative and IFC teams for great collaboration on this guidance that we're launching today for stock exchanges. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Anthony.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you for calling in from the Nasdaq exchange where you were there for the morning opening bell. That's fantastic. We're happy to hear that. And again, we're grateful for the collaboration with UN Women, and we look forward to continue that going forward. Last but certainly not least, we're very honored to have with us today the Managing Director of the Jamaican Stock Exchange, Ms. Marlene Street Forrest, who was the chair of the SSE Gender Equality Advisory Group that helped to provide so many inputs to this report to make it what it is today. Marlene, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure to be with you this morning. I am proud to be speaking with you on this auspicious day, International Women's Day, which recognizes women all over the world, regardless of their station in life. Actually, I'm just coming from the JSE ringing the bell for women's equality. We have just finished recognizing that activity this morning. It is also an immense pleasure to speak with you, as you said, Anthony, as the chair of the SSE Advisory Group on Gender Equality, about best practices on how exchanges can advance gender equality. I've heard mentioned by previous speakers that the advisory group was active, and indeed it was. The advisory group, which examined this important subject matter, consisted of 71 experts, and they're experts in their way because they have seen it, they have done within their exchanges. And these range from 51 organizations from 34 countries. And this is really expansive and good because it creates an essential and provided an essential input to the new guidance that we are publishing today. We thank them for the effort and time they put in to this valuable document. And this is really what we consider a living document, one that we expect that exchanges all over the world will adapt and will ensure that it gets done, it gets measured. They provided, and the group provided hundreds of examples, suggestions, and comments to ensure that exchanges have a valuable tool at hand as a reference point to help to create change within not only their respective operations, but also within the marketplace they regulate, then the marketplace they interact and assist in developing. We know change is necessary, and this guidance will provide that change. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues across the financial services sector and other relevant stakeholders who have taken the time and who have made the effort to work with the SSE and the IFC on this incredible project. Time is valuable to all of us, and to dedicate that time is really commendable. Great progress has been made. However, as we have heard with many of the bell ringings that there is still many gaps to fill, and especially post-COVID era, when things have regressed some, there's still many gaps to fill. And our reports briefly point them out for everyone who still needs convincing. Globally, women are still not given the same opportunities as their male counterparts in business and often also in private lives. Despite us saying that the progress has been made, but we have to continue to push to ensure that this progress is sustainable. As the theme for this year says, sustainability is important. Women are more often caretakers than men and thus conduct unpaid work, which has significant impact. Nonetheless, many times it's not officially measured and valued. They earn less and are less likely to control businesses. In Jamaica, we have found it is a little different in terms of the control of small and medium-sized, but not large businesses, making them dependent and prone to poverty. Now we want to remove that, and capital is one way to do that. Unless we do more to overcome barriers to gender equality, we will see repeatedly disproportionate impact on women's lives. The strides we have made in my home country, Jamaica, includes achieving universal adult suffrage as the first English-speaking country in the Caribbean in 1944. In 2020, that's a long time off, women make up nearly 30% of all parliamentarians, and this is significant for us. With regards to the JC's achievement, we have embarked successfully on positive training. Education is necessary, whether it is for male or women or female, but that positive training for social entities, which are primarily led by women. And this we are pursuing as well through our own social stock exchange and through our e-campus. Of course, we as exchanges we know that we cannot solve all these issues alone. There are stakeholders which we will have to engage, which we'll have to pull along. But together we know that with our market participants, we can become leaders for advancing gender equality. I really believe that exchanges play a pivotal role in this. We are central actors in the world of business and finance, and we have a significant role to play in ensuring women become equal participants in our markets and by extension in our societies. This new report offers many practical suggestions on how we can go about this role depending on our special market circumstances. So we have to adopt and adapt. We can lead by examples while also promoting and expecting higher standards of gender equality for our markets. Each exchange, regardless of where in the world it operates, can do something to promote gender equality and the achievement of this sustainable development goal. And that's the goal 5. And you notice I say something. We must start. Some of the guidelines for best practices and achievement by stock exchanges around the world are found in this document, and they include exploring opportunities to enhance women's financial literacy, particularly with a focus on investing. Many exchanges offer financial literacy training and exchange-sponsored investment games, the stock market games, but they can bring a gender focus to these and associated initiatives by tracking the extent of women's participation in these programs, by adjusting messaging, if necessary, to increase the participation of women and girls, because we all learn differently depending on our gender. Removing barriers to board gender equality. That's key. I heard another of our presenters spoke to that. One of the barriers to gender equal boards is a misperception about availability of qualified women to fill board roles and to meet targets for more gender equal boards. In markets where the representation of women on boards is particularly low, and the types of arguments, these types of arguments are made, exchanges need to consider developing board training programs that include an overview of the benefit of board diversity and guidance on how to promote greater diversity and inclusive participation at board levels. For example, in 2015, the B3IBGC, and that's the Brazilian Institute of Corporate Governance, co-sponsored a mentoring program to foster participation of women on boards. And more we find that women are taking their places. But again, it is too slow. And whereas we don't want to legislate, we want to encourage as exchanges that our companies that are listed get a proportionate amount of women on boards. Finally, exchanges could also consider the listing of gender-focused equity funds, and some exchanges are doing just that. We need to look at ESG investments and see these products and how the women can participate in that. There are two examples of this. The Asian Development Bank listed its first gender bond about $20 million in terms of the worth on the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange in 2021. The proceeds will go towards growing the lending operation of the Housing and Construction Saving Bank and promoting affordable residential mortgage loans for female borrowers in rural areas. And that is critical. I know that when you do a scan, housing solutions are very important, and women, as many heads of household, need that cushion. In Mexico, the Mexican federal government's agricultural trust fund, that's a FIRA, listed the country's first gender bond. And the bond, the aim is to improve female participation in the agricultural sector by promoting financial inclusion, employment, and entrepreneurship. So again, there are progress made. With this new updated guidance on gender equality, the SSE continues in its tradition of providing exchanges with practical tools to make a difference. And we need to applaud the work of the SSE. It continues to make a difference, and I look forward to seeing the progress that we can collectively make, so that the working document, as I said before, this document is not a document that sits on the shelf, but that it is a living, breathing document, and that we can all report back to say that we have made progress and these are measurable gains. Again, I want to thank the members who worked together to ensure that we could deliver on this assignment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlene. We really appreciate those thoughts, and we appreciate the role of the Jamaican Stock Exchange as chair of the SSE Gender Equality Advisory Group. And of course, I take the opportunity to thank all the members of that advisory group for their excellent contributions. I'm conscious of time, and I'd like to go next to Siobhan Cleary, who is the lead author on this report, just to give us a very brief walkthrough of the key points around the report before we go to our roundtable discussion. Siobhan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anthony. Can you hear me? And I note the brief. So in the interest of perhaps sort of keeping us on time, let me just pull out a few points that perhaps have not already been shared by some of the people who have spoken already, and pulled out some of the wonderful things that are contained in the report and the many examples that we have in the report. So the guidance was created through advisory groups, as all of our guidances are. There were over 70 advisory group members representing 52 organizations from 34 different countries. And it really was a consultative and iterative process. Lisa, if we can go to the next slide. So what is included in the guidance? The structure of the report I won't go into. You can see that in the report itself. Just to pull out, really the way that we approach this report and the construction of this report was by focusing on areas where we thought exchanges had the influence that enabled them to make a difference. So looked specifically at the role that exchanges play in the countries and communities in which they operate, and also where they would be perceived as having a legitimate interest. I think sometimes there is a perception that exchanges can just tell people what to do. This isn't always the case, much as I think sometimes it would be nice if exchanges could, but there are certain areas where exchanges really have a legitimate interest in either creating rules and requirements or compelling companies to act. And this is really where we try to focus, that intersection of influence and legitimate interest. We really try to build on what exchanges are already doing in most instances. There's one exception that I do want to pull out. And the reason for this is because exchanges have already invested significantly in sustainability initiatives, various from green and sustainability bonds, as we've already heard about, to disclosure requirements and others. And really what we wanted was not for exchanges to think this was an entirely new thing that they had to take on, but rather something that actually was very much aligned with what they were already doing in many instances. And of course, as always, this is built on the insight and input of experts. There was a great deal of back and forth and considered debate around the content that you have in front of you today. So next slide, please. As we've already had a few people mention, really the report, the center part of the report is an action plan that breaks these sort of specific areas of intervention for exchanges into two broad buckets. Those are more market focused, and then those that are more exchange focused. In the market focused areas, really what we were looking at is what can the exchange do to act as a lever in the market more broadly to drive change. And those were, we sort of said there were two sort of areas there. One was around the promotion of gender focused products and services, literally why exchanges exist, to not gender focused necessarily, but listing products and providing services to the market is the reason you have exchanges. So bringing a gender lens into that, listing of gender focused bonds, gender focused ETFs, and then also on the other side, strengthening market performance on gender equality, removing some of the perceived barriers to greater participation of women, for example, in senior leadership roles. And also in some instances, looking to see whether exchanges could actually encourage markets and participants, particularly listed companies, to do more in terms of having more women, for example, on boards through the use of listings requirements, and then just promoting greater disclosure and transparency. Much of this in response to what we know is growing investor demand for these types of things. Leading by example was really saying, if exchanges are going to ask companies to do things, then they need to be doing it themselves as well. So are they measuring their own performance on gender equality issues? What are they doing about promoting greater gender parity within their organizations? Are they using their position as an entity that has philanthropy, has charitable distributions, and are they disclosing their own performance into the market in which they operate so that people can see how they are doing and track their own performance? I did say there was one example where there was one opportunity we thought that existed where we didn't find examples, but after a lot of discussion about it, we said we thought that with all of these things, sometimes someone had to be the first mover, and that was in relation to bringing a gender lens into the markets that exchanges run for small and medium enterprises. We know that finance for entrepreneurial companies tends to be extremely gender biased. Women tend to receive less finance opportunities than men. So really, I look forward to hearing, hopefully in a year's time or in a reasonable time period, about the exchange that's really taken forward this idea of doing something with SMEs and women in particular. If we go to the last slide, Anthony. Oh, Lisa. So key points to take away. And really, these are just messages I want people to remember, would like people to remember, and this is in the report. We really have made progress. We need to acknowledge that, but we also need to acknowledge that we really still have a long way to go. So some of these facts have already been spoken about. Women earn less than men, still underrepresented in senior decision-making positions, disproportionately experience violence, threats of violence, sexual harassment, have less control than men over household financial decision-making. The bit that's not on there, it's in the report, even when it's their money. So even when they have earned the money, still have less control than men over household decision-making, and have complete legal parity in only 10 countries. As we've mentioned several times, this really is a lost economic opportunity. So this is something everyone should be interested in promoting, because really we're only holding ourselves back collectively by not doing this. And all exchanges can contribute to gender equality in some way. Anthony, back to you.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. And thank you again for your great contributions, your own contributions to drafting this, as well as processing the hundreds of comments that we received from the SSE Gender Equality Advisory Group from experts around the world. So really a great job. I think everybody appreciates that. Martine, I'd like to go to you next to moderate the roundtable, and I'm conscious of time. As far as we're concerned, we don't mind if we go over a little bit, and we hope that the participants will stay with us if we go over the hour just by a few minutes. Martine, to you.
Thank you, Anthony. Very happy to be part of this event and in such great company. And I also want to thank Siobhan for her overview, and indeed all of the work that has gone into this truly impressive report. As I read through the report, I was encouraged by the progress made since 2017, and also showcases many real-world examples, including several from IFC's own experience as we push for progress on better gender balance in capital markets leadership. Now, in the interest of time, let's turn to our practitioners and experts. I'm looking forward to learn from them and hearing about their own experiences on the role of exchanges in promoting gender equality, developing listing rules, and increasing transparency, among other things. We'll start with Olga from Latinx. So Olga, not only are you a CEO of Latinx Exchange in Panama, but you are also president of FIAB, the industry association representing stock exchanges in Latin America. What is your sense of the state of gender equality in Latin America? And what are exchanges and industry associations doing to improve gender equality?
Thank you, Martine, and thank you for the invitation. I'd like to start by explaining what FIAB is. Briefly, FIAB is the Ibero-American Federation of Stock Exchanges and Security Markets, with 24 members from Latin America and Spain. And to give you some of the numbers, last year, the Sustainability Committee conducted a survey with the participation of 80% of our members. I wish we would have had 100% of participation, but this is what we have. And briefly just go with you through the numbers so you can get a sense of how we are. 58% of our members are also members of the SEC. 80% are members of United Women, the WEBs, Global Compact, GRI, SASB, PRI, TCFD, CBI, and or the WFE, just to mention some. 75% have integrated sustainability into their strategic plan, and 50% have dedicated areas within the exchanges to assign resources to sustainability. 45% issue reports, 70% have issuance guidance in place for green, social, or sustainable issuances, and 10 of our members have also guidances on ESG matters for listed companies. As the SDG, we are 5. Women are still underrepresented in boards, in C-suite level, and key decision-making positions. I am confident that if we had available and updated data, I would be giving you different numbers this morning, but this is a result of what we have so far. However, I do have to say that, and it would be bad for me not to mention that going through the action wheel on the guide, and by the way, that I congratulate the work that the SEC and the IFC have done on this guide and all the time and effort from the members that were part of this working group, is that we in Latin America are working on achieving SDG 5 and in many different ways, such as by promoting gender equality internally through company policies and also for the stakeholders of each of our markets, by integrating gender equality into our stakeholder relationships. We are and have been either financially supporting or volunteering in nonprofit organizations that empower women and children. We also support the listing of gender-focused products and adapt SME offerings for gender inclusive, with gender inclusive lenses, And so far, as of this date, we have had over $740 US dollars in issuance that are gender inclusive and oriented to women. We also have enhanced women's ability to invest. We have different financial programs on an educational basis to more and more have inclusiveness of women in the financial business, also by saving and also by investing. We address barriers on gender equality on boards, and we also set gender targets requirement for listed companies. Most of them are on a voluntary basis so far, and some of our countries have started to have mandatory quotas and mandatory regulations for not only the exchanges, but also as well for the participants and the listed companies. We promote transparency on market gender performance through ESG disclosure. We have seen an increase of our exchanges and listed companies reporting on an annual basis. And we also have different indices within the region. We foster broader market action on gender equality throughout events. So far, we have been participants of the Ring the Bell for Gender Equality, and this year is no different. Also as well, within what the environment of the pandemic has been given, we have continued to have these events on a virtual basis, and by these means, creating awareness on this matter. We evaluate and disclose the exchange's progress on gender equality by increasing members reporting, as I had mentioned before, on an annual basis. We must continue, however, to have in place global standards and principles. This is very important. Again, I insist, and I have been insisting in the different webinars or spaces that I'm given, that we need to have publicly available and updated data. This is key and crucial. This way, we will be able to have benchmarks and KPIs to measure our progress in achieving gender equality. This is an SDG that is critical to our societies and economies, more now than ever, with a COVID pandemic impact and the unfortunate war happening as we speak. Thank you to the SSC and to the IFC for providing us stock exchanges and capital markets with a guidance, a great guidance, I need to say, that will help us advance in gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olga. And again, we still have a few panelists to go through, so please try to make your intervention as succinct as possible in the interest of time. Now we'll be moving to Carrie. A lot of the exchange focus on gender equality is aimed at listed companies, their boards, and the processes to ensure a stable pipeline of female hires. These are closely connected to the governance of a company. Can you tell us why it can be important for a company to have more gender balanced boards and hiring practices?
Thanks, Martine. And you might be aware that ICGN is a global investor body, and our members are based in over 40 countries around the world. They represent around 60 trillion of assets under management. So my remarks will focus really from the investor perspective. So we all know that boards are responsible for promoting the long-term success of companies, and in doing so create value for shareholders and other stakeholders, ultimately contributing to sustainable economies, the society and the environment. But companies themselves don't create value. It's people that create value by innovating, taking risks, and leading the company in alignment with the company's purpose and long-term strategy. So at a corporate board level, this really relies on there being a mix of genuinely diverse directors with relevant knowledge, independence, competence, and experience to help ensure effective, inclusive, and equitable decision-making. So by genuinely diverse, we mean individuals from different genders, age, ethnicity, economic origin, profession, cognitive diversity, and so on. And this sentiment is reflected in the ICGN's global governance principles, which many of our members default to for their voting policies and company engagements. We recommend that companies demonstrate their commitment to board diversity in clear policies, expressing goals, action plans, and measurable time-bound objectives. And they should also, of course, annually report on progress to their investors. So what else should boards be doing from a corporate governance perspective? Well, practicing what they preach is the first thing. At a minimum, we would expect at least 1/3 of the board positions to be held by women. Excellent chairmanship to facilitate a collegial, inclusive and productive board environment. Effective nomination committees to own the board's diversity policy, including regular review of action plans. And this committee is also responsible for conducting the annual board evaluation, which is a really great mechanism to facilitate board refreshment. And the committee itself, of course, should include female directors to lead by example. Ensuring that executive search firms identify and properly consider female candidates for director nominations. Overseeing the CEO's approach to human capital management with KPIs linked specifically to retaining, attracting and promoting women to leadership positions. And lastly, disclosing investment useful information, such as the percentage of women in new hires, senior management positions, promotions within the company, and employees taking parental leave. And this, by the way, is data that companies already have. So we don't think that it is too onerous to ask companies to disclose this information and to make it available in the corporate governance section of the annual report or on the company's website. How are investors themselves holding boards to account in their part to undertake their stewardship obligations? Well, they are evaluating company disclosures and assessing progress against the targets that have been set. They're engaging with nomination committees to build mutual understanding and, where necessary, encouraging change. They're publishing their voting policies, including how they take diversity into account when re-electing directors. They are disclosing their voting decisions, noting that nomination committee members are most likely to be in contention if diversity targets are not met. And finally, they're participating in public policy debates and market-led initiatives such as this one to help raise the profile of board-ready women. So on that note, I'll pause because I know there's lots more great presentations to hear from, and let me congratulate SSE and IFC once again for the fantastic report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary, for your good advice at the board level and from an investor point of view. And now we're going to move to Evan from Nasdaq. While we've made progress on the number of women on boards, at least in some jurisdictions, we still have too few women leading listed companies. Nasdaq recently introduced rules to encourage greater diversity on boards. Can you tell us about the thinking behind those rules and what was the market reception for those rules?
Yeah, thanks, Martine. I appreciate it. I'll be as brief as I can. Nasdaq has long believed that there is a significant correlation between equal opportunity and equitable access and other measures of outperformance. So we come at this issue from that perspective, a very business-centric, market-driven perspective. We're also big believers in the power of data and market forces and stakeholder engagement and smart regulation when necessary to drive change. So this is underlying all of our support, not only of the UNSSE, but also UN Women, the Women's Empowerment Principles, and other similar initiatives that are more focused on gender equality. So I'm happy to be here, happy to get the invitation from Anthony, but also even happier to have something to talk about, which is nice, which is this listing rule that we have just created. So we have created a new listings rule at Nasdaq that's aimed at increasing board diversity and transparency around board diversity. It came out last year. Nasdaq listed companies are required to publicly disclose board level diversity data using a standard template and standard definitions as much as possible, which is difficult in this space, and to have or explain why they do not have at least 2 diverse directors, including one who identifies as female and another from an underrepresented minority. There are certain carve-outs in the rule for foreign companies or smaller companies. They can meet the objective with 2 female board members or some other measure. But this went to the SEC for approval last year and was approved. So things are moving forward on it. I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, there are a number of US states that have objected to that approval and they're currently challenging this in court. So the jury is still out literally a little bit in terms of where this goes. But in terms of our rulemaking internally and our connection with the rulemaking body in the US markets, it is moving forward. It's undoubtedly, a rule like this is a blunt instrument. I mean, it's meant to create conversation and disclosure and transparency as much as, blanket compliance. We're generally encouraged by the reception that has happened in the markets so far. People seem to like the rule, like the idea. And we remain, despite the challenge, we remain firm in our belief that this is a necessary and effective step in moving the capital markets forward on this issue. You could read about many other steps that exchanges can and should undertake in the report, which I think is a fantastic summation of the multiple avenues of engagement and change making that exchanges can drive. And I'm a big believer in just about all of them that are listed there. And I think that Siobhan and the group has done a great job in bringing them to our attention. So in the interest of time, I'll leave it there. Nasdaq does a ton of other things to support women. There's lots of other places where you can read about them and hear about them, including from me, if you ever want to reach out to me. But I think that, the news of the day, in addition to the Ring the Bell for Gender Equality, which just happened here at Nasdaq and has been mentioned elsewhere, the news of the day really is this board diversity listing rule, and we'll see how it plays out, especially in the US capital markets.
Thank you, Evan. Please feel free to add some of the links to some of your resources in the chat as well, so the participant can use them. We're going to go to Jamie next. So Jamie, PWYF, Publish What You Fund, is a global campaign for aid and development transparency. A major action item in your report is that exchanges should increase transparency on gender equality in their market. What role can disclosure and gender-related data play in promoting gender equality?
Thank you, Martine, and thank you to the SSE team and the IFC for inviting me to participate in this discussion and to ask this important question. At Publish What You Fund, we actually work closely with the IFC to increase the transparency of development finance institutions, as well as advocating for greater transparency of several development actors around gender equality for several years. So I'm glad to see the IFC supporting this great work to promote transparency on gender equality among exchanges too, because disclosure and gender-related data are key to promoting gender equality, and exchanges play an important role here. So firstly, disclosure and gender-related data help us understand where we are now and where we want to go. It gives us a baseline of where there is gender inequality, where are there gaps, and at the same time, it can give us great insights into all the positive outcomes that greater gender equality can bring, right? Besides creating more economically prosperous and socially cohesive societies, data shows us that companies with greater gender equality and ethnic diversity at the executive level perform better on both profitability as well as long-term value creation. So disclosure and gender-related data are incredibly valuable. One might say it helps us identify problems. I would say it helps us identify opportunities. And by having those gender-specific metrics and consistently reporting against them, we can track our own ambitions and progress. Secondly, by disclosing and publishing more gender-related data, exchanges set really important norms. By being transparent about gender equality and expecting transparency around this from companies listed on their markets and the entities that transact through them, exchanges can send a signal that gender equality matters in the capital markets ecosystem. And this report does a fantastic job at highlighting the different ways that transparency can be promoted, and it mentions numerous examples. That's also why I'm excited that Evan from Nasdaq is here, because Nasdaq is a great example of how an exchange can promote transparency on gender equality. Last year, Nasdaq launched the ESG Data Hub, so that enables investors and others to access detailed information on company performance across various ESG topics, including performance on gender equality. So I highly recommend that everyone reads the report for the full overview of guidance and examples of good practice to find opportunities for exchanges to improve, because this report really brings home that improving disclosure and gender-related data on gender equality is feasible. So now it is up to the exchanges to act on the recommendations and to make this common practice, to set that norm. So many of us already know the importance of data for markets and exchanges for profit, for accountability, and I am thrilled that this report underlines that improving transparency around gender equality further contributes to those pursuits, and above all, helps us to create more gender equal societies. So thank you. Back to you, Martine.
Thank you, Jamie. And I will end the roundtable with Vuyo from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And JSE has, as a company, performs well on diversity, including gender equality. How does the exchange think about gender equality? And what is your exchange doing to promote gender equality?
Thank you very much, Martine. It's good to see you again, and good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me on board. I suppose as a starting point, the JSE does recognize priority 5 of the SDGs as one of the key priorities of the 19 in our company. Because as James has said, if you identify some of the issues that we see socially and economically, gender equality underpins all of them. So if you address this particular pillar, you address all the other issues as well. And the panel and the speakers I heard have already spoken about the economic challenges and the social challenges that women have faced, and also the benefits of addressing those challenges. So I'm not going to repeat that, but it's within this context that at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we developed a gender equality strategy to really look at how we can advance women issues and also promote equality both internally and externally. This gender strategy has 2 components. There's first the internal bit, because like Chauvin said, you want to model the behavior that you want to see. So we did a lot of introspection as an exchange to see how far are we actually promoting gender equality ourselves. So we started with developing a gender scorecard as well, which we've done this year. And we're looking at different pillars such as gender pay parity. So we've done a bit of work in closing the gap. The standard in South Africa in financial services is that there's a 21% gap between women and men. In the JSE, it's actually much less than 5%. And every year we look at improving that so that it actually is 0. We've got a caregiving policy that's gender neutral for new parents, because we also see the benefits of bonding at an early stage and also sharing the workload equally between men and women. We've got a very good policy that I think is quite novel. It's called a gender-based violence policy, and it's really to give support to victims of gender-based violence in our organization, but also to have a very clear stance that perpetrators of gender-based violence in our organization will go through a disciplinary process, because we do think it's a scourge. It's a second pandemic in South Africa, and we need to play our role in that space. And our corporate social investment also has identified gender equality as a category of investment. We address issues from period poverty to gender-based violence to access to education. And the one thing we're proud of as the JSE is about female representation in boards. In South Africa, the top listed companies, we've got 28% representation. At the JSE, it's 66% representation of women on the board and 78% of women as executives. So there's about 2 men in an exco of 9 people, which is really, really amazing. So those are part of the things that we're looking at internally. Externally, we're also saying we are an exchange and we need to look at how we can leverage on our position to drive change externally. So from a listed company's perspective, we require, as part of our listing requirements, that companies need to disclose to their shareholders the representation of the board, and also have a diversity policy that they disclose the policy. Targets such as Evan has spoken to earlier and the LSE has driven, and gender pay parity and gender pay reporting. I think those are small steps we're working towards, and in good time, I suppose. It is a marathon. We are working with organizations such as the International Women's Fund, and also the Gender-Based Violence Fund that is set by our President Cyril Ramaphosa, to advance legislation that is centered around gender pay parity, representation, but also social issues. So we do believe that legislation is a way that we can actually drive this or fast track it. So we are doing quite a bit of advocacy work as the JSE. And I pick on Shavan's challenge. Yes, we are looking at how we can help small, medium enterprises grow, especially women-owned ones, grow in their respective businesses, especially access finance, because that is an area that's also, we see that women are quite marginalized in accessing finance, but also accessing business opportunities. So we are seeing an opportunity to grow that space, because it will contribute to employment in the country. And we're also looking at different aspects like products. So we've launched our first diversity ETF last year in November. We're looking at the convener role that we can play in bringing government, civil society, and public companies together to address topics of gender-based, of gender equality. So those are one of the few things that we are doing. And I want to congratulate the SSE for the guidance note. I think it will give us a good space, particularly me as a gender champion for the JSE, to go back to our board and say, these are other areas which we could focus on. So I will leave it there, Martine. Thank you very much, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you to you as well, Rio. Thank you again. It's very impressive to see the menu of all the things that JSC is doing. So thank you to all of our panelists, Olga, Carrie, Evan, Rio, and Jamie. Wishing you all a wonderful day. Anthony, back to you.
Thank you very much, Martine. I'd like to thank all of the speakers we had today. We had a very ambitious schedule, and nevertheless, we were still able to finish without going over by more than about 7 minutes. I thank all the participants who joined us from around the world today. There are links in the chat box where you can download the report. There's a link on your screen where you can download the report. Thank you again to everyone. And I can imagine we could have had another hour to discuss this and not run out of things to say. We will be doing more events in the future as we further our collaboration with the IFC and with UN Women on this area of work. So we look forward to speaking with all of you and working with you in the coming months and years as we continue to work in this area. Thank you very much. This concludes the webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.